Hi, my name is Sean. I'm one of the people that's working on the BioMass mod, and I thought I'd take a couple minutes today to just show a couple parts that we've been working on, specifically the parts that are related to the compression and decompression of gases. Now, one of the motivations behind BioMass is that if you're talking about space exploration, then sort of built into that is this idea that you need to be able to keep your individuals alive, or in this case, your Kerbals alive. So one cool way to do it would be to use biological systems, such as, greenhouses in space. And once you start doing that, you can start thinking about, well, if you're growing enough biomass, then you could then use that biomass to make biofuels. But let's just focus on the gases today. What occurred to me tonight while I was noodling around with things was that I could, in theory, use the compression parts that we've been making to work just out of the box with squads parts. So underneath utility, we have a series of compressors. There's a CO2 gas compressor, there's a hydrogen gas compressor, and there's an oxygen gas compressor. In addition, just for our test purposes, we have a big tank. It holds a couple of different fuels just for test purposes, but one of them is oxidizer. So we can put this onto our sort of test rig that we're making here. We'll put an oxygen compressor on, and on top of that oxygen compressor, what we're going to put is this sort of new part that I just put together tonight. The model is by Roberto, but I put together some new information on the CFG file. And so what this part does is it will take intake air that you would get from, say, a circular intake, and it will break that down into the atmospheric constituents. So in Earth's atmosphere, it is roughly 21% oxygen. And that's what this thing will do. It will take the intake air and it will output approximately 21% oxygen and a very, very small amount of carbon dioxide. Now, one thing I want to point out on these compressors, if I can find it, there. So there's different colored tanks that are on the compressors. On hydrogen it's red, on the CO2 is gray, and on the oxygen is white. We also have a series of tanks that are color-coded in the same way. This is the color code that's used in the real world by various industries so that you can identify what is in a particular container just by looking at it. So in this case, we have an oxygen tank that I'm going to mount on here that is white. And on the other side, a carbon dioxide tank, which is gray. And, excuse me. And I think we're ready to demonstrate how this setup works. So there are a couple things that will be going on here. You have to activate two parts in this case. The first is this cryogenic condenser. So we'll activate that. And what's happening at this point, I don't know if you'll be able to see what's going on. The oxygen resource is going up, but so is the carbon dioxide. It's just doing so very, very slowly because there's much less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there is oxygen. With this intake of oxygen, what you can then do is turn on the compressor and start compressing that oxygen into oxidizer. The oxidizer in that test tank that we have mounted at the bottom continues to go up. If I should shut the intake on that circular intake, everything comes to a halt, except for the fact that we're still converting the oxygen into oxidizer because we have this additional tank on the side that we've stored oxygen in. As soon as that tank is depleted, that conversion will stop, and that will be it. Let's make this a little bit more complex. because what's going on is we have both the separation of oxygen and carbon dioxide going on. So what we can do here, how do I want to do this? We can So what I'm doing is I'm mounting an oxygen compressor on one side, a carbon dioxide compressor on the other. Underneath it, we'll put 2 of our test tanks, just so that we can balance out masses. Now, the test tank does not store compressed carbon dioxide. I probably should have modified that before making this video. But what we'll do is we will put a compressed carbon dioxide tank on the side of this one, and yes, I think we're ready to go. Let's see how that does. So again, on the top we have our just generic squad air intake. And then we have our atmospheric separator, which I've just activated. So we're having an influx of oxygen, carbon dioxide. We'll start the carbon dioxide compressor as well as the oxygen compressor. Now this is going to burn through electricity because each of these processes is pretty intensive as far as the amount of electricity that's needed. But what you can see over here is we have the compressed CO2 gas increasing. We also have the generation of oxidizer. So this is actually, I think, pretty handy because you need oxidizer if you're going to be going out and exploring. Right now, Squad doesn't have any tanks that hold just oxidizer, but this is a potential way, for example, if you were to land on Lathe and you needed to store up on oxygen that you're going to use in your trip, because once you have oxidizer, you can sort of use this compressor, not to say that it is a decompressor is sort of a weird way to put it. It's not so much a decompressor as it is a release valve. So it will take oxidizer and then allow you to turn that oxidizer into oxygen for keeping your Kerbals alive during your trip, for example. That's it, and I hope that you found this interesting and that you will keep an eye on more videos like this in which we talk about different parts for biomass.